Good morning. I'd like to welcome members to this first hybrid meeting of the Development Standards Committee and remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on Angus Council's YouTube channel. I've agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking, please, and raise your electronic hand should you wish to speak. Members here present in the chamber, please just raise your hand if you wish to speak during the meeting. Okay, we can move on to any apologies. Sarah.
Yes, convener, an apology from Councillor Doran, and we have Councillor Fairweather and Councillor Stewart attending remotely. All the other members of the committee are present in the chamber.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are any members wishing to declare any declaration? Not in the chamber and neither remotely. Okay. Agenda item 3 is on building warrants. The committee is asked to note that during the period the 4th of March to 7th of April.
Sorry, Councillor Ball has joined remotely and had his...
Oh, did he? All right, okay. Sorry, I'll go back to the declaration of interest. Sorry, Councillor Gall, you wish to declare an interest?
Apologies, convener. Yeah, sorry, I had problems, so I've just logged in. I'm sorry for not confirming with you. It was just, sorry, a declaration of interest that item 8 is an application in my name, so I'll remove myself as we go into that.
Thanks very much. Just make sure we'll do that when we get to agenda item 8.
Thank you.
Right, okay, moving on again back to the Buildings and Warrants. Committee's asked to note that during the period the 4th of March to 7th of April 2023, a total of 46 building warrants, 2 demolition warrants and 20 amendments to warrants have been approved with an estimated cost of £5,873,698. A copy of the approved warrants has been sent to every member, so is that noted? Thank you. Agenda item 4 is on delegated decisions. Again, the committee is asked to note that during the period the 4th of March to the 7th of April of this year, a total of 61 applications have been approved and 4 refused under the Planning Acts through the scheme of delegation to officers. Again, a copy of the list of delegated applications has been sent to every member. Is that noted also? Noted. Thank you, members. Agenda item 5 is a minute of the previous meeting. We submit for approval as a correct record the minutes of our meeting of this committee held on the 14th of March 2023. Have any members got any comments or adjustments considered necessary? No, so not is the minutes agreed. Thank you. Right, the first of our planning applications are 3 today. The first one is for the field opposite Westfield Drive, Westfield Loan Forfar by Muir Homes for a residential development of 159 dwelling houses, including formation of vehicular access roads, open space, landscaping, SUDs and associated infrastructure. Report 103/23 is submitted by the Service Lead of Planning and Sustainable Growth. Mr. Taylor, you're dealing with this. You'd like to go ahead?
Thank you, convener, and good morning, members. So, item 6 is an application for full planning permission. It is a major application for a residential development of 159 dwellings. The application includes the formation of vehicular accesses, roads within the development, open space, landscaping, drainage facilities and associated infrastructure on land at Westfield Loan Forfar. So the application site is located within the development boundary. It is situated to the southwest of the settlement or the west of the settlement of Forfar in the approximate position of the dashed red line. The site forms the northernmost part of an area of land which is allocated for residential development in the local development plan. Allocation F4 identifies that this area of land is identified for around 300 houses with development commencing in the northern part of the site, which is what we're looking at today. So the application site occupies an area of around about 12.6 hectares of the wider allocation of around 39 hectares. So we're looking at around about 1/3 of the overall land allocation. Within the proposal, 159 dwellings are proposed. So in terms of how that relates to the wider allocation, we're looking at around about a third of the allocated site and around about a half of the dwellings which are foreseen in the local development plan for coming forward within that area. The local development plan establishes the principle of residential development on the site, and the development plan has strong support for residential development in that area, subject to appropriate detail tests being satisfied. At this stage, I'd also draw members' attention to the area of pink shading, which is located to the north of the application site. That is the Orchard Bank Industrial Estate. That is an area which is safeguarded for employment purposes within the local development plan. So this is an aerial photograph which shows the approximate position of the application site. So the red dashed line again shows indicatively the location of the site. It's currently prime quality agricultural land in active agricultural use, but in circumstances where land is identified for residential development in the local development plan strategy, there are no issues in terms of the loss of quality land for residential purposes. The site has a number of factors which affect what can take place within it, including a scheduled ancient monument which occupies an area fairly central within the site. So you see two tree lines which come down within the field. The scheduled monument occupies much of the area to the southern part of that section of field and extending further to the east. There is also a scheduled monument adjacent to the southern site boundary, a circular shaped monument which is located in the approximate position I'm showing with my cursor. Within the site, two accesses to the public road are proposed. A primary principal access is proposed to be formed on Glamis Road in the northeastern side, in the approximate position of the blue arrow here. And a secondary access will be formed onto Westfield Lane, opposite Westfield Drive, in the approximate position of the blue arrow shown here. So the white roofs you'll see to the north of the site, they are buildings associated with the Donna Low premises, which is contained within the Orchard Bank Industrial Estate. Between those buildings is one of the two main routes into the industrial estate. I'd also draw members' attention to the location of the A94 Glamis Road, which runs along the northern site boundary, and Westfield Lane, which runs along the eastern site boundary. So in terms of the layout of the site, I will get into a bit more detail around about this in subsequent slides, but just in general terms, this slide shows the two access points onto Glamis Road and to Westfield Lane, and it shows the location of housing, with the majority of housing located towards the southwest corner of the site, a terrace of property located along the northern boundary of the site, and property located to the northeast of the site. The SUDS area, the sustainable drainage area, will be formed adjacent to the Halfpenny Burn, which is located to the northwest, and the access into the site will be formed via a sort of tree-lined avenue, which is generally a good feature in terms of design characteristics. The terrace of housing which is proposed along the north of the site has been designed so that it provides an acoustic barrier, with housing in that area designed so that while it overlooks Glamis Road, the habitable accommodation would be largely contained to the southern side of those properties, with non-habitable rooms such as bathrooms, kitchen areas located to the north of those properties. Now that measure is necessary because of noise issues identified in the applicant's noise impact assessment information. And just touching a little bit further on that topic, I've mentioned the location of the site relative to Orchard Bank Industrial Estate and relative to the A94 public road. The application is accompanied by noise assessment information, and our colleagues in Environmental Health have reviewed that information and are not satisfied that the methodology which has been utilised in the preparation of that information is satisfactory, and therefore to consider that the conclusions reached within it can't necessarily be used as a reliable basis on which to inform the development. So they have objected to the application on the basis of the methodology used in the noise assessment information. So this is just intended to give you a flavour of the different styles of house and flats proposed within the development. So on the bottom, we have 3D images which show a range of 2- and single-storey house types. The development does include single, 2-storey and 3-storey house types within it. It includes a mix of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5-bedroom properties. So there is, generally speaking, a good mix of house styles proposed within development variety, which is what development plan policy generally seeks to achieve. The illustration along the top of the slide, apologies, the quality of that's not particularly good, but that's an illustration of the acoustic housing as is described in the submission, the line of housing which is proposed amongst other areas along the Glamis Road site frontage. It's intended to provide an acoustic barrier from noise associated with the public road to the north and the adjacent employment land. The application is accompanied by a phasing strategy and master plan. On the right-hand side, we have what's described as a phasing strategy. So the dark green area is the land we're looking at today. That's the Muir Homes area. The strategy in the master plan identifies that area has capacity for around about 170 houses. The darker blue or purple area located to the south is in the control of Scotia Homes. The master plan information suggests that has capacity for around 160 houses. The plan also identifies the road between the Muir Homes and Scotia Homes areas with additional capacity for housing, as well as this lighter shaded blue colour to the south west of the site. So the master plan submitted suggests there is capacity in the wider allocation for well in excess of 300 houses. Moving to the slide on the left-hand side of the slide, we have the concept master plan. In orange, that identifies areas identified for housing development within the master plan. So within the area we're looking at today, you have the orange area on the left-hand side and an area adjacent to Westfield Loan. What that does show is that there is a conflict between the layout we're currently considering and that master plan, in the sense that a number of houses are proposed along the Glamis Road frontage. That is not an area identified for housing in the applicant's master plan. And there is some discussion about the master plan and the suitability of it contained in the report before members at paragraphs 8.6 to 8.14. So I'll just do a little bit more detail about the layout proposed, and I'll start with the area to the south west of the site. Generally, the housing proposed in this location is generally speaking in accordance with development plan approach. It proposes outward-facing perimeter blocks with housing overlooking streets and open spaces within the development and private garden areas to the rear of properties. So that is the type of approach that the Council's supplementary guidance seeks to achieve for housing arrangements. There are a range of parking solutions proposed in this area, front garden parking in places, side garden parking and parking courts. The affordable housing will be delivered in this southwestern part of the site, where I understand 40 affordable houses will be delivered as part of the development. Moving to the area slightly further to the east, again, this is generally consistent with council design guidance and policy, outward-facing perimeter blocks generally, overlooking open spaces within the development. As a consequence of the noise associated with activities adjacent to the site, it is necessary on plot 57 in this general location for an acoustic fence or wall measuring 3.3 metres high, and that's not an ideal design characteristic for development in that area, but that is a necessary consequence of the proximity of the site to noise sources and adjacent land uses. So I'll move to the areas to the north of the site and the northeast of the site, where unfortunately the design issues are more significant an issue for this proposal. So the terrace I've touched upon, which runs along the Glamis Road frontage, is constrained in terms of what development can be achieved in that location. The area to the immediate south is the scheduled ancient monument, so that's not an area where housing development can come forward. And the consequence of the design solution and the space available within this part of the site is, while the houses successfully front on to Glamis Road to the north, they unfortunately back on to the public road and to the open spaces to the south. That is not consistent with council design guidance, and that is a design characteristics which has resulted in refusal of other proposals in Forfar and elsewhere in Angus. Moving on to the areas to the northeast of the site, accessed from Westfield Loan. Again, we have houses in some circumstances with back gardens or side gardens which back onto the open space rather than provide natural surveillance of those areas. Again, that is not consistent with council design guidance. In the areas around Westfield Loan, again, there are a number of houses which back onto Westfield Loan or have side gardens onto Westfield Loan. The houses in that area, we would normally look for those to be addressing onto Westfield Loan to provide natural surveillance, to provide safe and pleasant places. There is a further issue around about that. The road service indicated that a necessity along the Westfield Loan site frontage. Along that frontage, we have, at the moment, we have a fairly narrow verge. We have significant level changes in that verge. We have mature trees along that road frontage, and we have a stone dyke. Now, these are the types of features we would normally expect to be incorporated into the development, and the way to do that would typically be to have a footway provided actually within the site itself along that frontage, and the houses oriented to overlook that area of open space. So something more akin to what happens in this part of Westfield Loan on the existing housing on the east side of that street. So the design solution, unfortunately, doesn't allow that to come forward in an acceptable manner, and that is inconsistent with council policy and design guidance. Finally, the application proposes a play area to the northeast corner of the site. That play area will be located adjacent to Glams Road, adjacent to Westfield Drive. It's not particularly well connected to the majority of housing within the development or to other open spaces within the development, which again is something development plan policy seeks to achieve. Landscape Services has identified concerns about the location of that play area, its proximity to public roads, emissions. They do not consider that to be a suitable form of development for a play area and suggest that should be relocated elsewhere within the site. So there are a number of design issues associated with the approach to development located to the north of the site and to the northeast of the site, and that is explained in some detail in sections 8.15 to 8.27 of the report. I don't have many more slides, just intended now to give members a flavour of circumstances on site. So I have some photographs of the roads, the road junction locations, and the pictometry image. So this slide shows a pictometry image of the site currently in agricultural use. It shows the approximate position of the proposed access points and the proximity of development to the A94 public road and to the Orchard Bank industrial estate. And these are the Don and Low premises, which are close to the site in that location. This slide is taken on the A94, so it's taken from the west looking east in the direction of Forfar Town Centre. On the left-hand side, we have the Don and Low industrial premises, and the proposed access onto Glams Road will be formed just on the right-hand side here. There will be some localised carriageway widening required to create a ghost island to provide a safe access into the site in that location. This slide is taken close to the junction of Westfield Loan, looking in a southerly direction along Westfield Loan with the A94 to the rear of the photograph. On the left-hand side, you can see existing development on Westfield Loan. It has houses overlooking the street, the footpath set back. On the right-hand side, we can see some of the conveyed earlier in the presentation, level changes along the road verge, a stone dyke, mature trees. These are features which we would normally seek to see retained, the positive features in the townscape which we would wish to see retained. And unfortunately, the layout as proposed doesn't allow that to happen in an acceptable manner while providing a footway along that road frontage. Finally, we're looking down from the approximate position of the access onto Westfield Loan, looking in a northerly direction down towards the A94. Again, this just shows constraints around about the level changes in the verge, the stone wall, the position of mature trees, and the difficulties that will be there in terms of achieving an acceptable design solution for allowing for provision of a footway in that location. So bringing matters together, the local development plan has strong support for residential development in this area, and this is the location where the strategy seeks to see residential come forward in this part of Forfar. But that needs to come forward in a manner which is compatible with council policy and design guidance. The information submitted in terms of the master plan suggests that the wider allocation has ample capacity to deliver the strategy in terms of in excess of 300 houses within that location. And on that basis, there really is no need to provide or to accept design compromises, which is what will be required in terms of the solution before us today. So while the principle of development is acceptable, the detailed layout is not considered to be acceptable. There is also an objection from colleagues in environmental health who have identified concerns with the methodology used in the noise assessment. They don't consider that to be a reliable basis on which to make a decision. The application has attracted a number of representations. Those representations are addressed in the report before members, and they include issues relating to design. As I say, on balance, we consider the various factors, and while we would like to see the site come forward for residential development, we do not consider the design solution to be acceptable. We are concerned about the methodology used to assess noise, and on that basis, the application is recommended for refusal.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Taylor. Can start off just with asking members if they have any questions of Mr. Taylor. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I guess I've got two questions for Mr. Taylor. Can we get the view of the planning service and indeed perhaps Roads colleagues about the issue about the junction on the A90, which is referenced in the paper, so we completely understand what the arguments are there? And the second question is, if we look at the sort of the diagram of the site, I mean, looking at I've seen lots of development sites, there seems to be a huge amount of green space here. Is that due to these monuments in this sort of squarish bit in the sort of north-east corner? Is that the explanation behind that? Yeah, because it does look like it's got a very high percentage of green space for most housing developments. So yeah, you've answered that one, but certainly I think the road, is just to understand the arguments on the road, because I think is an important issue.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. I'll touch upon the open space first, just briefly, but you've accurately summarised the situation there. There are two scheduled ancient monuments within and adjacent to the site, and the applicant has identified that those areas, amongst other areas, would be provided as open space. The Historic Environment Scotland has welcomed that approach. It would stop the land being used for agricultural purposes, which they consider to be a better option in terms of safeguarding the remains of the monument within those areas. But the open space is completely adequate for this site in terms of its size, at least. Moving on to roads issues. So there has been transportation assessment information submitted, and colleagues in roads may wish to comment on this. Transport Scotland has indicated that they are satisfied that the development could come forward without any additional works required to the trunk road in terms of this phase of development, but they have made it clear that they would not wish to see any further phases of development until sort of a mechanism is in place to deal with capacity issues at the Lochlann South Junction and safety issues around about that junction. So Transport Scotland's been clear, they're quite satisfied that this aspect of this part of the development, this number of units can come forward, but they would have a problem with further areas coming forward in advance of mitigation being agreed and timescales for that to take place. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Andy.
Yeah, just concur with switched itself off. Sorry, thanks, convener. Yeah, just to confirm what Ed has just relayed to members, Transport Scotland have not objected to the application for this number of houses at the moment, but they do have concerns about right turning traffic entering Forfar in connection with the wider master plan site.
I could just clarify then, what Mr. Barnes is saying is that they'll let this development go, but no more. If that site was further developed to the south, then we, the developer, would have to come up with a solution for the Lochlanns Junction. And I guess we would be expecting the developer to pay for that work. Yeah. It's Transport Scotland's junction against rather than our junction. Is that right? Is it a trunk road?
It is a trunk road. Yeah, Transport Scotland's been clear that they wouldn't wish to see any further development without mitigation measures being in place. I don't suppose they're overly concerned with who funds that. They won't want it to be them, but the key here is that it isn't an issue for this application, but it would be an issue for future phases.
Can I just add a question onto that, bearing in mind we're talking, Councillor Duff brought up about the Lochlanns junction. Is there anything, Andy, on the Glams junction impact at all that is worthy of note in this application?
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, there are no concerns with respect to.
Sorry.
Seems to keep dropping off. Sorry. Yes, sorry, Convener. Yeah, there are no concerns with respect to the use of Glams Road. It's already grade separated. There's no issues with capacity either.
I keep some of them. Sorry, Councillor Nicholl, please go ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Convener. Mr Taylor, Historic Scotland seem to have concerns with the discrepancy in various drawings affecting the scheduled area, and also the lack of how the anthrax was disposed of and the location of the actual site. I've got concerns with that.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Firstly, I'll touch on anthrax, if that's okay. I actually meant to cover that in my presentation because you've mentioned it before, so I apologise for not doing that. So the applicant has considered that matter, and it's understood that there is, or there was historically, cattle buried which had anthrax in the approximate position of my cursor. So the applicant has done some testing, and that testing has given us no reason to consider that there's been any migration of anthrax from that area towards where the residential development be. Members will also note there are residential properties closer to that area than are proposed in this application, and relevant consultees are satisfied that there's no concerns relating to anthrax insofar as it relates to this development. In terms of the second matter you raised, the scheduled monument, I think HES has identified some issues, some discrepancies, particularly I think relating to the potential route of this road that you see out with the site, which skirts around the second monument to the southern area. We don't consider there are any significant issues in terms of the consideration of this application and the scheduled monument. There are some details that would need to be ironed out around about where acceptable landscaping can go. HES don't want to see landscaping, big trees within the monument, for example, but that isn't considered to be a significant issue for the proposal before us. These are matters that could be addressed in terms of future phases or planning conditions were the proposal otherwise acceptable.
Okay. Again, any other questions from Mr Taylor, from members? Councillor Beattie.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Mr Taylor, on that map, can you just point out again exactly where the 3.3 metre bund will be? And I understand there's meant to be a 2 metre acoustic fence on top of that. So that's 5 metres of defence against noise.
Again, probably a slight failing in my presentation, so apologies. In the presentation, I pointed out the necessity to provide an acoustic fence for plot 57, which would need to be, I think, 3 metres high as identified in the noise assessment. My understanding is that there is the terrace of housing that we see along the northern extent of the site, and the design of other houses means that there's no longer a requirement for a high bund along the Glamis Road frontage. Instead of the bund, the proposal is to have the houses acting as an acoustic barrier in that location.
Any other questions, members? Could I just seek a point of clarification, Mr Taylor, on this again? If we're going back to the terrace houses on Glamis Road and some of the houses on Westfield Loan that are proposed, council design policy, as you referred to, is that habitable space should open onto road. In the case of the terrace here, we've got the road of Glamis Road and we've got an internal road as well. So is there a conflict there as to location of which way houses should be facing?
Thanks, Convener. So the issue we've identified here relates to really the position of back gardens. I don't think there's any significant issue in terms of the concept of the properties having surveillance of the land to the north. Kitchen areas, while yes, you would want habitable rooms generally to provide surveillance, but the kitchen areas are well-used areas of properties, so we're not concerned about lack of surveillance to the north. Our main concern relates to lack of surveillance to the south and garden areas being in the public realm, which is, as I say, something design guidance looks to resist, and you see elsewhere in the development outward facing perimeter blocks have been achieved, and that part of the development is considered acceptable. Unfortunately, that it's less successful in this area of the site in terms of achieving that.
Okay, thank you very much. If there's no other questions for Mr Taylor, we do have a couple of speakers this morning. I just remind them, under Standing Order 13 of Angus Council, applicants, supporters and objectors are given the opportunity to address any points which they wish the committee to take into account in coming to its decision. Speakers will be given 5 minutes only, and I'd remind speakers that members of the committee have already been provided with the opportunity to read all submissions and thus may already be familiar with most of the points to be raised by speakers. So each speaker, you do have 5 minutes. I think the first person is Mr. Mitchell, Fraser Mitchell, representing Elite Homes. Mr. Mitchell, are you there?
I am, sir, yes.
Sorry, Mr. Mitchell, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. Please go ahead.
Many thanks. Good morning. My name is Fraser Mitchell, and I'm a partner at Shepherd and Wedderburn, specialising in planning and environmental law. I act on behalf of Elite Homes Tayside Limited, and they've asked me to make this submission on their behalf, and I'm very grateful to this committee for the opportunity to do so. I'd like to focus on 2 key issues. First, the failure of the application to comply with Policy F4, and second, the adverse consequences of noise issues at the application site. Dealing first with Policy F4, my client's view is that the approach taken to the application breaches this policy. The background to the policy is that the examination reporter for the 2016 LDP acknowledged that Site F4 was subject to significant constraints. 2 steps were therefore taken to encourage those constraints to be addressed. First, the site was allocated to deliver housing from 2021. This gave the applicant 5 years from the adoption of the LDP to resolve all constraints. 8 years later, this has not been done, and the application is deficient in a number of material respects. Second, the reporter recognised that addressing those
Lost your sign,
constraints...
Mr. Mitchell. Your sound's popping out now. If you could just keep close to your mic, please.
Absolutely. My apologies, sir. Second, the reporter recognised that addressing those constraints required a strategic approach. To ensure that this would occur, the policy contains 2 key requirements. First, that no development will be allowed until a full assessment of the potential impact on the A90 junctions, including Loughlin's, is completed, and any resulting mitigation is agreed with Angus Council and Transport Scotland. And second, that development proposals should be in accordance with a master plan prepared for the site. In terms of the assessment of the A90 junctions, the report is clear that this has not been done. Transport Scotland's position is conditional on mitigation for the Loughlin's junction being identified and then agreed with all future applicants. Again, this has not been done. Approval of the application would mean that the application site would not contribute towards any mission required as a result of the cumulative impact of developing the whole of Site F4. The responsibility for the mitigation of the A90 junctions would be left to the developers of the remaining parts of Site F. These were precisely the circumstances that the reporter sought to avoid. In terms of the master plan, Policy F4 requires all development proposals to be in accordance with a master plan. The master plan should therefore be approved first so that both the council and applicants have a clear understanding of the framework for development. This has not been done. The master plan was submitted as part of the application and has been reworked several times. It has not been subject to any public consultation or Angus Council approval process, and therefore should not form the basis for the determination of the application. Even if the process were to be acceptable, the application does not reflect the current version of the master plan. The consequences of this approach are that there is a lack of certainty over the site-wide approach to development and infrastructure. There's a lack of clarity over the design and layout of the development. And as an example, as already mentioned, the Children's Play Park has been located along the boundary of the site directly adjacent to the A94. In so doing, it breaches the Council's design guidance and raises significant health and safety issues, specifically for children. Had a master plan been approved at the outset, this would have been avoided. Turning to noise, the application raises amenity issues from traffic noise and noise from adjacent industrial operations. Environmental health is objected on the basis of concerns over the methodology and assumptions relied upon in the applicant's noise assessment. If the application were to be approved without these issues being resolved, noise is likely to exceed acceptable levels for residents. The consequences of this would
Sorry,
be
Mr. Mitchell, you
severe.
have 1 more minute. You have 1 more
Many
minute.
thanks.
Okay.
Under planning legislation, the council must take particular account of the effect of noise on a new development from businesses in its vicinity. Approving the application in its current form would therefore breach that duty and render the decision vulnerable to legal challenge. If the new residents were subject to unacceptable noise levels, the existing operators would be a statutory nuisance. In a worst-case scenario, this could result in enforcement action limiting the hours of operation at Orchard Bank Industrial Estate for those industrial operators that carry out noise-intensive work on a 24-hour basis. That could be catastrophic. For these reasons, together with the reasons set out in the report, my client maintains their objection and respectfully requests that the application is refused.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for that. If you just stay on the line, members may have some questions for you. Do any members present have any questions for Mr. Mitchell? I don't think anybody on the line. No, okay, no questions, Mr. Mitchell. Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll move on now to a representative of the applicant. I think we have Elaine Farquharson-Black here, representing Muir Homes. And when you're ready, ladies, we have you have 5 minutes, and I'll remind you when you have 1 minute left. Now your presentation should go on to that length generally. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, convener. Thank you, members, for the opportunity to address you today. As I say, I'm Elaine Farquharson-Black. I'm a partner in Drury Solicitors and I'm legal planning advisor to the applicants. I have Nicola McCowan-Hill from Muir Homes here, and we do have consultants on the line to answer any questions. It's always disappointing to be addressing a planning committee when the application is recommended for refusal. But when that recommendation is based on sweeping claims such as the proposal would not be safe and pleasant or welcoming, and it wouldn't provide an acceptable residential amenity and refers to long-term harm, then I must confess that gets my legal raised. On what basis are those claims made, and are those claims justifiable? It's the role of this committee to consider the recommendations that are in the planning report and from Mr. Taylor today, but to reach its own conclusions based on all the evidence that has been submitted in connection with the application and exercise its own planning judgment having regard to the legal framework. I don't have time, you'll be pleased to know, to go through all the points, but just some key points that I'd like you to bear in mind when making your decision. As Mr. Taylor said, the application site is allocated for development in the local development plan. And Mr. Taylor referred to strong support. In fact, there's a legal presumption in favour of residential development on the site, and it forms part of the council's strategy for delivering homes in this area in the period 2021 to 2026. Refusing the application has implications for the council. It makes it susceptible to housing being developed on land out with the settlement boundary in Forfar. There is a current application and a current appeal in that regard. At this point, I would make the point that the objector who has spoken before me, who's a competing developer, there is no conflict with policy F4. That's been a repeated claim that's been made, and the council has confirmed that's not an issue. It is a site which is allocated for development, but as Mr. Taylor said, it's not straightforward. He listed all the constraints that there are, the steep level changes, the 2 scheduled ancient monuments, the area, there's a floodplain, there's a water main crossing it, and there's noise, as we've heard from the other side of the road, and the industrial use. These have all been assessed by my client's consultants, and they have shaped the layout and the accompanying design. And through these assessments, my clients would submit they have been able to demonstrate, and the report is confirmed, that there'll not be a detrimental landscape impact, no visual impact. It won't impact on built cultural and natural heritage, doesn't impact on the road network, including the trunk road network, doesn't impact on schools. There's no flooding or drainage or contaminated land issues. There's no objection from any statutory consultee other than environmental health, who's concerned that there might be, and I stress might be, complaints from prospective residents in the houses. With respect, there's simply no evidence before you to justify a refusal based on noise concerns. The officers rejected the standard landscape bund and noise barrier that's often used to mitigate noise. And my clients have designed, as you've heard, a bespoke acoustic housing development across the Glams Road. And the noise impact assessment has been carried out in accordance with industry standards, in accordance with agreed methodology. And it has demonstrated that there are no plots within the development which will experience unacceptable noise levels, indoor or outside. 159 dwellings require a closed window solution to achieve that acceptable noise levels. That leaves the claim that the development doesn't meet the council's design guidance, and I would stress it is only guidance. Yet the report acknowledges that the range and design of housing is appropriate for the location. The recommendation for refusal and the sweeping statements I mentioned about safety and amenity appear to relate to the location of the play area and the orientation of a limited number of the 159 dwellings. With regard to the location of the play area, as you saw with the map, you have to take into consideration the other locations. The location of the schedule agent monuments, the floodplain, the Suds Pond has to go in the location shown because it's the lowest point, and the need for the play area to be overlooked as much as possible by active frontages. So that's the only possible location for the play area. And then in terms of the orientation of the dwellings and depart, we've heard from the council's guidance on perimeter block arrangements. 11 of the 12 dwellings that we're talking about with the rear gardens fronting onto open space are the bespoke acoustic housing that needs to be designed in that way. Had the officers accepted the bund and the acoustic barriers, then the houses could have been turned around the other way and would have met the guidance. And in my submission, it's unreasonable to insist on one solution and then to criticise it for failing to meet the guidance in the other.
Just give you one more minute.
Thank you. And due to the 10-metre buffer zone around the Schedulania monument and the steep change in levels, that means there's limited space for the housing at Westfield Loan. And again, if the houses were turned around, then it would mean that there was more houses that would be accessed from the rear and not fronting the open space. It affects 7 dwellings. House builders are often criticised for putting standard housing on every site. In this case, my clients have designed a development that responds to the physical characteristics and constraints. Yes, it results in some of the houses departing from the council's guidance, but it does not, in my submission, result in a design which is significantly contrary and justify refusal. It's my clients' interest to build safe, welcoming and pleasant developments. They've been doing it for 50 years. They want to do that here as well. In conclusion, Convener, I respectfully submit that if there are minor tensions with the orientation of a limited number of dwellings within the development, the application still can be considered to be compliant with the development plan policy as a whole and material considerations support development. And I would respectfully request that you uphold the application and grant consent and allow housing to come forward, particularly the 40 affordable homes that Mr Taylor mentioned, as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Farquharson-Black. Again, open to members present and online for any questions to Mrs Farquharson-Black or to any of the consultees online as well. So, Councillor Clark, apologies.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, everybody, and good morning to yourself. Just in terms of what you've just said, which I listened to very intently, would the timing of the master plan make a difference to any of this discussion today? Because it's already been mentioned, you know, the timing of the master plan. It's not a trick question, believe me, it's something to help me.
Can I just ask a question? What do you mean by the master plan?
Apologies, Councillor Clark, go ahead.
Okay, I'm thinking in terms of, it's already been mentioned that the master plan, and I maybe picked this up wrong, you know, forgive me if I have, was alongside the application. Now, can you clarify that to me? Because I'm just thinking in terms of, I'm a forfeit councillor, I'll need to be able to stand up to everything I decide today, on the merits of today, nothing else.
Keep your microphone on, please.
I have Mr Barnes's problem. Every time I press it, it goes up again.
The reason we ask is because people online won't hear you unless the microphone's loaded.
Yes, I appreciate it. I'm scared it's going to go off now. there's been considerable work done on the master plan over a number of years, and I think we're on, I don't know how many iterations of it. There's been close working for the master plan over the wider site with the officers, and that's continued. And the Muir Homes is working with the adjacent developer, Scotia Homes, in terms of that wider and looking at the transport assessment. I disagree, and as I've put this forward in writing to the council, I disagree with the indication that the master plan needs to be approved prior to a planning application being determined. And my understanding is that the council agrees with that. And in fact, the master plan is no longer going to come forward as supplementary guidance. You have a detailed application before you, which fits within the wider master plan, but a master plan is only a framework. And I think Mr. Taylor referenced the fact that the breach of the master plan is the acoustic housing that runs along Glams Road. Well, that's a detail that responds to the discussions with environmental health. It's not something that I would expect necessarily to be anticipated in a master plan, so I don't think there's a breach there that would support a refusal based on a non-compliance with the master plan. I'm not sure if that's answered your question in terms of timing.
It has, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moore, for that. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I'll open it to members now for comments on this application, and we'll start actually with Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Convener. We do need housing in this area. Very difficult to build on any ground, not quality agricultural ground around Forfar. But I agree with the officers. This application does not meet the criteria of the policies 14, 20, 21, 23 of the NPF4, policies DS3, DS4, TC2, and F4 of the ALDP. So I would propose we refuse it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nicholl, for your view. Councillor Clark.
I'd like to get back to a comment, Convener, if that's okay. I'm quite surprised when I read things like, I see that the NHS has given a very detailed explanation and their comments on the anthrax issue, if there is one. But I am quite surprised when I read that there's no comment from Tayside Health Board and indeed the three doctors' practices on the issues that may well occur with any planning application. I'm being very careful what I'm saying here. I also would further to say that I know that there's a complicated system by which our children and learning services look to see capacity for schools. I understand that. I've understood it for many years. I do worry about that, though, in every application. So these are the comments I would like to make, sir. Thank you.
Councillor Darnell.
I'd just like to thank everybody for the work that they've done in this project, because obviously it's come to us before and now it's come back again, and it's a lot of work for everybody. But I think it does need to be ensured that it's perfect, because once these houses are built and once these roads are built, it's the local councillors that are the ones that are, by the constituents saying, well, I can't drive that way, I can't park that way. There's, everything has to be perfect, because at the end of the day, if it's not perfect, then you can't fix it after it's built, And I do feel that we do need housing, and this is a perfect site for the housing, but we do have all the restraints that's in plan. And I feel personally that if the plans could address all the issues and all the concerns, I would be happier before I pass this application. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Darnell. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'm going to come back to roads. I mean, you may think I'm fixated on the road, but I actually think it's a pretty serious issue. And I can remember when the dual carriageway was built and Forfar had no grade separated junctions. Every junction was dangerous, I think, and on a 60 mile an hour, 70 mile an hour dual carriageway. I think that's unacceptable in this day and age. And we've still got one junction that doesn't meet, in my view, modern standards and is potentially dangerous. I think that's an issue. Now, what we're saying is Transport Scotland will allow this development, but no other developments. And that means that this developer effectively is going to get off scot-free for paying for this junction. And the second and third developers, if there are them, are going to have to pick up the cost. And we'll come back to this issue. We don't have a master plan. This just looks like a mess. And I'm not using planning in the sense of this department's planning, but the overall planning by the various developers doesn't look to me like there's not much joined up thinking here. And if you get in first, you can get your development approved without paying for an improvement to the road which is needed. And that seems to me fundamentally unfair. So, I mean, in this occasion, I would agree with Councillor Nicholl. I would support the officer's view and reject this application. But I think that the road is probably my biggest concern.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duff. Would anybody else like a comment? No. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Fairweather. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up there. Apologies. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was a bit slow as well, convener, trying to get my hand up. Can I thank both the speakers actually, because they both put very good arguments forward, and did make me think, right, what way am I going to go on this particular application? After reading what the officers had put into the report, I had kind of made up my mind. I've now definitely made up my mind, because I do, like Councillor Duff, have concerns regarding the road, but also the assessment from the officers regarding the noise. But the play park certainly would be a big issue for me. I would suggest, I mean, yes, we need houses, and the affordable houses are a must. We definitely need them. But I do think this whole application needs another rethink. So I agree with the officers with this refusal at this time. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Councillor Fairweather. You're dropping out and in there, but we got the gist of all your comment. Thanks very much for that. Okay, can I go on back to Councillor Clark? Another comment?
Yes, as a local member, I would have to agree with the colleagues before me and have to agree with the planning officer as it's laid out today. I can only comment on today, and I will stick to that. I would agree entirely with what they've presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. Right, I think I'll just sum up here. I think I'd echo the thoughts of members here present today and thank everyone for their input to all of this. This has been a long time coming, and it's been put back a couple of times that I'm aware of, as in the past as well. Also to the speakers, thank you for your contributions this morning. Briefly in summary, having gone through what were extensive papers on this, I think what's been brought forward is that there are concerns. Roads and Transport do still have concerns here, not just on the A90 junction and Loughlin's, but also in relation to the overall transport assessment. I get that, but also there's questions regarding travel for people for walking, on pavements, particularly on Westfield Loan, cycling, to give that space without desecrating what's there at the moment. We have opportunities like this in other parts of Angus where provision has been made without taking down trees and walls and things. So that's one part. Environmental health, there is questions over the noise impact, certainly, and I was wondering about houses being built after an industrial estate being present, but it was very clear to me of how that could then come back on industry later on. That is a concern. On landscape services, yeah, the location of the play park was a concern to me, and it was described as being not suitable. I would actually irk it on almost dangerous in the corner where it is, for fumes, and the fact children being right on the corner of two main roads would be a real concern. I know they'd be fenced in, but regardless, I would think that there's better placing. There does appear to be, for me, a large disproportionate number of properties in this area of the total site, 159 on 12.6 hectares, when the total area is 38.8 hectares in total. And to come back to one of the main concerns, that what's viewed as unacceptable layout and design of housing, particularly in relation to the council's design and placemaking supplementary guidance. I accept it is only guidance, but it is effectively council recommendation. That said, there are a lot of issues here. We do require housing in Forfar. This is part of the local development plan for housing. So the issues that have been brought up, I don't think are insurmountable with conditions made on planning. But taking cognizance what everybody else has said, and also advice on council officers, I'm going to move to refuse this application as it stands today. Are there any amendments from members to a move for refusal? No. Thank you then. In that case, planning application number 19/00707 FULM by Muir Homes is hereby refused. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on to agenda item 7, which is planning application number 22/00738, submitted by Nor Consultants Limited on behalf of Angus Council for the demolition of Moneyfeith High School and the erection of a new high school with early learning, childcare facilities, replacement swimming pool and other associated works, car parking, bus drop-off and external sports provision, and play spaces at Moneyfeith High School, Panmuirfield, Moneyfeith. It's report number 104/23 by the Service Leader of Planning and Sustainable Growth, and I think Ms. Porter, Stephanie Porter, is to present on this one. Steph.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, everybody. This presentation relates to item 7 on the agenda today, and as the Convener mentioned, it's planning application 22/00738/FULM. It's a major application. It relates to the existing curtilage of Moneyfeith High School, located on Panmuirfield Road in Moneyfeith, and the proposal seeks to redevelop the site to form a new high school with early learning and childcare facilities, as well as new recreational amenities, including a swimming pool and sports pitches. The proposal also allows for improved landscaping, parking and separate bus and car drop-off areas. This slide you'll see here, it just takes a bit of a lag between my screen and your screen. This slide you'll see here is an extract of the Moneyfeith proposals map from the ALDP, and the location of the school is roughly located by my cursor here, if you can see that. The school is easily accessible from the town centre and is in proximity to established public transport links. And as you can see from the image in front of you, the wider school grounds are designated green and they're protected for open space. There are other policies in the local plan which seek to safeguard existing public facilities such as schools. This slide in front of you shows the existing layout of the site. So the school building is located in the south next to the access which is taken from Panmuirfield Road in this area here. The football and athletics pitches are generally located behind the school in the kind of northeast area of the site, with the exception of a blazed pitch which is indicated by this dashed rectangle in this area here. However, this currently isn't in use, as you can see from the plan in front of you. It's currently accommodating a modular building which provides additional classroom space. So the Dichty Water runs diagonally across the top half of the page to the northeast of the site. The site is surrounded by residential properties to the southeast, the southwest and the west. Category A listed Balmossy Railway Viaduct is located in the north area here, and this also forms part of the Seven Arches Viaduct core path. This slide indicates the proposed layout for the development, where the school building is indicated by the white rectangle with the lighter grey lines which denote the the ground floor plan of the proposal. The building's located in this area behind where the existing school building is, as the existing school building needs to remain operational during the construction phase of the new building. The main entrance is in the same general vicinity taken from Panmuirfield Road. In this instance, the bus drop-off would be provided further into the site. As previously mentioned, there would be a separate car drop-off area indicated here and a new car park located in the east of the site. The sports pitches would be provided, so the rugby and athletics pitch is provided in the north area, in the area of existing open space, and a new all-weather pitch and grass pitch would be formed in the footprint of the existing school building. This image here, the two images across the top of the slide, indicate the existing school building. So the main entrance is shown on the top left-hand corner there, and the existing two-storey school building, as you can see, the majority of it's forward in the site, closest towards Panmuirfield Road. The two bottom images indicate the proposal, and as you can see, the 3D image here indicates that there is a canopy which denotes the main entrance to the school, and as you can see from the bottom right-hand image, it illustrates that the school is set further into the site, further away from existing neighbouring properties. Again, this is another 3D image of the proposed building. However, I would note that the window configurations have changed slightly since this 3D image was compiled, although it gives you an indication of what the building may look like, as the proposed window alterations are minor. The school building is designed to accommodate around 1,200 young people, 30 children and 30 children within the early years facility, and 172 members of staff. The building is relatively contemporary, and it consists of both flat roofs and low monopitch, and it's finished in large sections of glazing, light and dark coloured buff brick and metal cladding. The two-tone of buff brick allows the building to, the massing of the building to appear less prominent, and as you can see from this image here, generally speaking, the ground floor of the building would be in a darker buff and the upper two floors are in a lighter colour. The bottom image here indicates a cross section through the west to east of the site, nearer the southern boundary. We have got the properties on Dawson Crescent indicated on the far left-hand side here, the proposed school building on the right-hand side, and the existing school building is indicated by the dashed red line. As you can see, the proposed school building will be notably higher than the existing school building, but as previously mentioned, the building is located further within the site, further from neighbouring properties. The proposed building would be designed so that classrooms are located around the edge of the building, with the larger communal spaces in the centre, such as the games hall and the dining hall. And the school, the swimming pool and the plant room would be located in the single-storey element in the kind of right-hand side of this image. The building is also going to be designed to meet Passive House standards with stringent levels of airtightness, and the building's been sited and orientated to maximise solar gain. As you can see from the 3D image in front of you, there will also be solar panels located on the roof, and there'll be air source heat pumps to provide heating and hot water to the building. So 2 objections have been received to the proposal from members of the public who live on streets adjoining the site. One concern has been raised in relation to impact upon the environment, but as previously discussed, the building has been designed to meet Passive House standards and incorporates a number of renewable energy equipment. The proposal would only result in the loss of a small number of trees located in the centre of the site forward of the existing school building, roughly in this area indicated by my cursor. And as part of the construction process, there will be tree protection measures put in place to protect the trees located around the periphery of the site. Additional tree planting is also proposed as part of the new development, as well as wildflower meadows, which are incorporated to aim to improve the biodiversity value of the campus. Information submitted alongside the proposal indicates that the site has low potential for protected species, as do the existing buildings which are to be demolished, and a small number of trees which are to be felled from the site. The proposal would not result in any unacceptable impacts upon the built or natural environment, subject to the development being carried out in accordance with a biodiversity conservation and enhancement plan. So objections also been received in relation to impacts from noise, and this includes noise impacts from playing fields and late night and weekend openings. In terms of the impact upon amenity, the proposal will result in siting of a floodlit all-weather pitch and a grass football pitch in proximity to dwellings to the southwest. The all-weather pitch is indicated by the slightly darker rectangle here. And it is located in the general vicinity of, as I mentioned earlier, the Blaze pitch, which is located, is indicated on the top image by the orange rectangle. But as you can see, it's currently accommodated in a two-storey modular building, which is the slightly darker rectangle within that area. The image on the top right-hand side of the screen gives you an indication of the properties in Dawson Crescent which back onto the school. So these are their back gardens with the boundary wall, the footpath which runs along the southwest boundary of the site, and the Millennium tree planting which is between the properties in Dawson Crescent and the Blaze pitch. So a noise impact assessment has been submitted as part of the application. The Environmental Health Service has reviewed this and has no objection in terms of amenity or in relation to noise from plant and machinery or with regards to the external illumination levels from the flood lighting of the all-weather pitch. This is subject to a noise rating condition for fixed plant, a maximum lux level condition for the lighting, and the submission of a glare assessment. The submitted NIA also concludes that the predicted noise levels at neighbouring properties from use of the sports pitches by young people and school-related activities are compliant with relevant criteria subject to mitigation. This mitigation includes the erection of an acoustic barrier, and the acoustic barrier will be located in the region of this, I think, red cloud outline along the south boundaries and up the western boundary of the all-weather pitch. The proposed acoustic barrier would look something similar to the image on the bottom right-hand corner, which is the timber fence with a mesh fence located in front of this. The purpose of the mesh fence is to prevent the noise generated from the balls potentially hitting off the timber fence. So the Environmental Health Service has considered the findings in relation to the use of the pitch by young people and school-related activities and are satisfied that this would not result in unacceptable impacts upon neighbouring properties. The noise impact assessment does, however, identify some concerns regarding the wider community use of the pitches, particularly adult use, where noise levels could be higher. However, Environmental Health has suggested that a planning condition with a maximum noise limit and other controls such as limits to the hours of operation of the pitches by the general public to between 9 and 9 on weekdays and 8 till 5 on weekends, and the requirement for activities to be undertaken in compliance with an agreed noise management plan would not give rise to unacceptable impact upon neighbouring properties. This approach would allow for school use of the pitches, but also the potential for wider community use, subject to compliance with the maximum noise limit. The terms of the noise management plan condition would be such that if the noise limit is exceeded, some further restrictions on the use of the pitches may be necessary. This could include restricting the maximum number of pitches used at any one time, or restricting the groups that are permitted to use the pitch. So the use of the site as an educational and community facility is long established, and there are known impacts associated with the level and nature of activity generated in the area. While the new building would have increased capacity and would potentially increase associated activity in and around the school grounds, there is no reasonable evidence to conclude that the layout or design of the proposal would result in any unacceptable impacts on amenity subject to the proposed planning conditions. So the final planning points discussed today, the objection points discussed today, relate to impacts upon the local road network, traffic, pedestrian safety, access and parking provisions. On the left-hand side of the screen here, you'll see the existing access to the school. The top image taken from Panmuirfield Road and the bottom from Weems Crescent. And on the right-hand side, you can see the proposed entrance layout. Again, as previously mentioned, the general access point will remain the same. However, this will be improved with a separated pedestrian access, which you can see in this area here. There'll also be specific bus drop-off areas, car drop-off areas and car parking provision. The road service has advised that the access and parking arrangements associated with the proposal are acceptable and are likely to result in some improvement compared to the existing situation, particularly with respect to the school buses, where the current arrangements often cause conflicts due to inappropriate parking of other vehicles in the bus drop-off turning area. The applicant's transport assessment indicates that the increase in car-generated trips from the enlarged development would only be slightly less than 30%. This does not include a reduction for car sharing, for example, where siblings already attend the school. And the transport assessment concludes that there's capacity in the existing road network to accommodate the proposal. An alternative access point was suggested in the public comments, and although vehicle access and egress may be possible from alternative locations, the relevant consideration in this case is not whether an alternative solution might be available, but whether the proposed arrangements are acceptable. And in this case, all evidence suggests that the proposed access and parking arrangements are appropriate and acceptable. So to conclude, the proposal relates to a replacement school located on an existing well-established accessible school site, which is safeguarded for that use. The proposal would provide improved facilities, landscaping, parking and access in a manner which is compatible with development plan policies subject to planning conditions. There are no objections from statutory consultees or material considerations which justify refusal of the application. And for those reasons, the proposal is recommended for conditional approval.
Thanks, Steph, for that. Members, do you have any questions for Ms Porter? Councillor Dunno.
Thanks for that presentation. It was really good. I'd just like to ask, with obviously there's going to be a childcare facility in this building as well. Can you tell me where the parking is in relation to where the childcare unit is? Because I can't quite see it on there.
Thank you. So the childcare facility is actually located near the main entrance of the building. So it's roughly in that area of my cursor here. So obviously the drop-off points here, or there's car parking there. So there is direct pedestrian access from wherever the kids may be dropped off right up to the front door of the childcare facilities.
Could I just add, could we make sure we have enough child sized parking spaces, because it turns out that a lot of the parking now is done by grandparents, and when you're trying to struggle like toddlers and other children out of cars, etc., and there's not enough room, so if we could maybe make sure we've got enough allocation of that size of parking, because a lot of these cars are bigger now.
Thank you. The Parking Commission does comply with the road standards. I note your comment regarding the larger cars, and I think ideally the drop-off area would probably be fairly handy for that because it's wide enough. But yeah.
Any other comments? Sorry, questions of Ms Porter from members? Just one I have on this one, just thinking about with happening at some of the primary schools where we have exclusive zones for no vehicles coming in at certain times. This isn't scheduled for this obviously at all, is it? This is because the change here, obviously the pedestrian access is very clear, and the bus route in and the bus bay is very clear here. The roadway in looks like I'm assuming that's almost two-way traffic, I think, going in there and to a turning circle to come back out again. So essentially, where are the drop-off points? Because we've got car parking, I can see, but where, if people are coming in, grandparents, whatever, with the children, where essentially would they drop off? I see the circle to return and come back out again, but where's the drop-off points?
Thanks, convener. So the drop-off points for cars is actually that lay-by in this area here.
Yeah, out of interest, do we know how many cars would fit into that? I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's just
unfortunately not off the top of my head.
Okay, not to worry. Okay, that's my question. Councillor Brace, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, thanks, convener. And I'm not sure if this is entirely relevant to this committee, but I just wondered, you said it is to be air source heat pumps. Why air source rather than ground source heat pumps?
I'm not entirely. Oh, I'm working. I'm not sure behind that, but obviously the education service have deemed that they would be appropriate. And from the planning perspective, the air source heat pumps would be located in a plant compound, which you can see roughly here. And from our perspective and from their colleagues in environmental health, these wouldn't result in any unacceptable impacts on the amenity of the neighbouring properties.
That's good. Thanks for your answer. And I will ask someone else more relevant about it. Thanks.
That's Councillor Braze. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to comments then in that case rather than questions. Councillor Melville.
Yes, thanks, convener. Thanks, Mrs. Porter, for that. I'm really pleased that following the committee's consideration of the proposal of application notice some months ago, that the school will have solar panels on the roof and other climate-related technologies. I think it's really important that we as a council bake these kind of future technologies, well, not future technologies, but future-facing technologies into the infrastructure that we're putting together. And I would just draw committee's attention to 8.24, that there are no material considerations that justify refusal of the application. That's my piece.
Thanks, Councillor Melville. Anybody else? Any other members with comments on this application? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Fairweather online. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you, convener. Can I just thank everybody that's been involved in the planning for this and the design. I think it's absolutely tremendous. I'm absolutely delighted to support this.
Lost your sound, David.
I'm absolutely delighted to support this, unless you didn't hear it, thank everybody who's been involved in the work for this and the design of this new school. This is great news for Montefieth and certainly indeed for the pupils who will attend the school. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. Councillor Braze.
A comment. Yes, I certainly support this application as well. I think this will be a massive leap forward to secondary education in Montefieth, an enormous improvement on what currently exists. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, well, I can only just agree with both Councillor Fairweather and Councillor Braze on this. It makes me wish I was 40 years, 50 years younger to be able to go to school of this quality. So the replacement for Montefieth High School is very much needed and is an exciting design submitted. Just to be a consideration of submissions by other people, the distance of the school is significantly further back from some of the housing. I think there's a lot of thought gone into acoustic barriers and also looking at tree protection measures, additional tree planting, taking that into account, and also the hours of operation will remain to be seen. It's not always easy to police these things, but we need to have cognizance to it. Regardless of that, happy to move approval of this application, and I presume that's got general agreement. Okay. Thank you very much. Planning application 19/00707 FULM. I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. I'm going on about. Apologies. Planning application 22/00738 FULM for the demolition of Montefieth High School and the erection of a new high school is hereby approved. Thank you for that. Just before we move on to agenda item 9, Councillor Gall, if you could leave the meeting, please. Are you hearing me? Oh, he's gone. Okay. Right. Agenda item 9 is a planning application submitted by Ian Gall for the siting of Shepherd's Hut and converted jet holiday accommodation units on land adjacent to 1 Glenskinnell Farm Cottages in Montrose. It's report number 105/23 by the Service Leader of Planning Sustainable Growth. And again, Mr. Taylor, I think you're going to lead on this one.
That's right. Thank you, convener. So application 22/00860 relates to a proposal related to the siting of a shepherd's hut and a converted jet to provide holiday accommodation on land at Glenskinnell Farm by Montrose. So this slide is intended to just give you a wee bit of context for those who don't know where Glenskinnell is. It is located around about 2.5 kilometres to the west of Hillside on an elevated area of land above the public road, around about 1 kilometre to the north of the A935, which links Montrose with Brecon. So the location of the site is identified by the position of the dotted red line. It's a site which is located within the building group. There's agricultural land to the north and to the south. There are a number of residential properties to the west, southeast and further to the east. I draw members' attention firstly to the position of the green coloured circle. That is an existing tourism-related development which is operated by this business. It's understood that's been reasonably successful and the applicant intends to expand that business. And in that respect, development plan policy is generally supportive of tourism-related development where associated impacts can be mitigated. Now, this is an application which involves the siting, amongst other things, of a converted jet to provide holiday accommodation. So it isn't a form of development which is typical to rural Angus, and that's probably part of the reason why the proposal has attracted some public comment. Representation has been received from the Old Bothy, which is located to the immediate southeast, and to a residential property within the Glenskinnell Farm Cottages row further to the west. They raise a number of matters which I'll try and touch upon in the presentation, but largely those matters relate to access, impacts in terms of the character of the area and the suitability of locating a jet within the site, and impacts on amenity. Access to the site will be taken utilising the existing farm track, which joins the public road in the Pudgeston area or the Well Hill area to the southeast, around about 950 metres to the southeast of the site. That track is in reasonable condition. Most of it is fairly straight in length. There is places on that track for vehicles to pass. The character of the track changes slightly as it turns west in front of Glenskinnell Farmhouse, but along that route, while there are sharp bends along that road, there are places to pass, and it's likely that where forward visibility is limited, vehicle speeds are also likely to be consequently reduced. But in terms of access matters, the road service is satisfied with the proposed access arrangements, the access track is in reasonable condition, and the development would provide suitable parking provision to accommodate the 2 one-bedroom holiday units which are proposed. So the site layout plan, that's shown on the left-hand side. So firstly, the converted jet will be sited to the southwest of the site, and the shepherd's hut will be sited to the northeast of the site. If we move to the right-hand side of the slide, you can see a photograph of the jet. Its wings effectively have been removed, but by and large, it remains sort of the characteristics of it remain as originally would be expected. The shepherd's hut photograph is located to the bottom. Sorry, that's not particularly large, but you can see in the elevations, it's a structure which is around about 3 metres high. In fact, both structures measure around about 3 metres in height. So during the life of the application and in consideration of the matters raised in public comments, some amendments have been made to the proposal. The site benefits from existing landscaping along the southwesterlymost part of the site, along the southern boundary, along the access track, which in the time of year when the hedge is in leaf will provide some landscape mitigation. That will be augmented by new 2 metre high planting which will be formed in this space between the existing property, the access track and the site itself. So amendments have been made to alter the access and parking arrangements so that a continuous line of planting can be formed along that area. And the thinking there is that would help to reduce impacts on the amenity from windows from the jet towards the Old Bothy, and it would also reduce landscape and visual impacts of the development. But in terms of landscape and visual impacts, council policy tries to direct this type of development, tourism type development, to locations within existing building groups where the development can sit in a position where it shouldn't result in unacceptable landscape and visual impacts, and should be seen in the context of other buildings within the building group. In addition to the mitigation already referenced, the applicant provided a film 20 metres. It's noted that the distance between cockpit windows and the nearest parts of the residential property to the southeast would be around about 33 metres, so well in excess of the minimum standard, and mitigation is proposed to reduce that overlooking potential further. So just 3 or 4 photographs of the site to give you a bit more context. The jet plane is currently located within the application site. It's not currently in use, but at least this allows us to get a better understanding of what impacts are likely to be. So you can see the position of the jet plane in the background towards Paradise Cottage, which is in the southwest of the site. The Shepherd's Hut will be located in an area around about where I'm showing you with my cursor, just in the northeast of the site. There is some existing planting, which is located along the southern site boundary and along the western site boundary, which would help to mitigate impact, and that will be augmented by significant new planting along the periphery of the site. The old bothy is located just in the edge of the image to the left-hand side. This slide is taken from the sort of, I suppose, southwest of the site, looking along the southern site boundary, and you can see mitigations provided by existing hedging along the southern part of the site. It is necessary that that's augmented by new planting just to reduce landscape and visual impacts and to provide a backcloth to the jet, particularly in views from the north. This is taken from the access track to the immediate south of the site. The old bothy property is on the right-hand side. You can see the hedge planting. It's not in bloom yet, so it isn't at its peak mitigation at this point, but you can see that when that's in leaf, it will provide some landscape mitigation in views from this location. This is taken from the northeast of the site, looking to the south. So you can see the old bothy on the left-hand side, representation received from that property. You can see the position of the jet. The white vehicle shows the approximate position of where the Shepherd's Hut will be located. But we see this dark screen fence, which provides the garden ground boundary to that property. And I suppose, in effect, the hedge, when it's augmented, should fill that gap along the line of that dark coloured fence. Finally, looking from the northwest of the site in a southeasterly direction, you can see the position of the old bothy relative to the fuselage and the cockpit. As I've suggested, the applicant proposes landscape mitigation in terms of hedging, and they propose to apply a film to the windows just to mitigate overlooking impacts towards that property. But there are 2 objections to the proposal, and matters referenced in that objection have been addressed in the presentation, and planning conditions are proposed to mitigate impacts associated with the development. Development plan policy is supportive of tourism development when appropriate mitigation can be secured. This is considered to be a situation where appropriate mitigation can be secured and impacts associated with the scale of the development are not considered to be unacceptable. On that basis, the application is recommended for approval.
Thanks, Mr Taylor, again for that. Do members have any questions of Mr Taylor? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Convener. Mr Taylor, in 6.4, and you've kind of answered it a little bit, but I'd kind of like to just tease it out a wee bit. We've got Hillside, Dunn and Logie-Pert Community Council, and the point that they make is a very well made point about they've not objected, but requested clarification regarding the site restoration. And you get that normally when people are putting up wind farms and things as well, and there's sometimes a bond involved. And today, I read as well about the condition there. So it's kind of answered my question, but if we can just clarify that a wee bit, because this is a statutory body asking a legitimate question.
Thank you for the question. I wholeheartedly agree, and as you've noted, we've put a planning condition on which requires removal of both the aeroplane and the Shepherd's Hut should the use cease to operate. That's obviously a mitigation that deals with issues should the use cease to be carried out, but we've also added conditions, and the applicant has made amendments to deal with sort of impacts associated with the operational phase of development. We're satisfied that there are arrangements that deal with operational impacts in terms of when the development's in use, and that deal with matters should the development stop to be used, cease to be used.
Has anyone else a question for Councillor Burnell?
this might be a crazy question, but you know, when we've had really bad storms lately, will that be really secure on the ground, or just like, you know, after what happened to the trees in Edsall, I'm just wondering, you know, obviously it doesn't have any wings on it, but is it as stable as a caravan would be? You know, obviously caravans can blow away as well, but just wondered how stable it is actually in the location.
It's difficult to give you a technical answer to that one, I'm afraid, but certainly the structure is mounted on, I suppose, a steel frame, and as I understand it, it would have a sort of a decking or a frame formed around about it, which all of those factors should ensure that it's physically attached. I think it also has a drainage connection. So we have no evidence to suggest that it wouldn't be safe, for example, but I'm afraid that's about as technical as my answer can be, I'm afraid.
Thanks, Mr. Taylor. Again, any other questions at this stage before we move to comments? Question? Oh, well, we'll get to comments in a second. There's no. Yeah. No.
Question. It maybe. I suspect that Mr. Taylor's answer to that question, previous question. I mean, this for me is less of an issue for planning. It's more an issue for colleagues in building standards, because there's a lot of questions you would ask, but they're not really planning questions. It's about, have we got safe access and safe exits and drainage and all that sort of stuff, I would have thought. And presumably approving this today is fine, but the applicant is going to have to comply with the usual building standards conditions.
So on that, my understanding is certainly at the very least the drainage arrangements would need a building warrant. I also understand that the development would need a caravan site licence as well. Now, whether that deals with the specific matters you've raised or not is another matter entirely. But there are other regulatory regimes that would regulate this operation.
Okay, we'll move to comments. Councillor Nicholl, you're first.
Thank you, Convener. I think this is a great project for tourism and everything in the area. And I've slept on many airplanes, and I hope this one's a lot more comfortable than the ones I have. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Other comments? Councillor Clark.
Well, I'll try not to be facetious, but really, as a 60s singer, leaving on a jet plane comes into this, it's got to. But I really think, you know, innovative, interesting tourist facility, you know, I'm sure this'll go well. We've already had assurance should they decide not to have it in a wee while, but Scotland needs tourists and we need some place for them to be. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people interested to bide in a plane for a wee while. Well done.
Further comments, Councillor Brace?
Yes, well, I think this is a very exciting diversification for the applicant. And just a comment, you know, at Glenskennel Farm, there have been jets screaming over that farm for about 40 when the bases were working. And
So it's certainly unusual, to summing up here. I think had it been in a more built-up area, I might have a slightly different view on it all. But regardless, the fact there's going to be landscape mitigation here for the immediate housing to reduce impact, and as Councillor Bayes has said, there's some robust conditions attached to this. So on that basis, I'm happy to move acceptance of this application, unless anybody's got any amendments. No. In that case, planning application 22/00860, full for the siting of Shepherd's Hut and converted jet holiday accommodation on land adjacent to 1 Glenskirner Farm Cottages is hereby approved. That concludes our applications for today, everyone. Thank you very much for attending, both online and in person here, and we'll see you at our next meeting. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye now.
Thanks, convener. Thank you, Convener.